What is up? How's it going? It's me, Mr. Carter. Can you guess where I am? I bet you can't. Do you recognize the posters? That's right, I'm in the storage closet. I hope you're having a fantastic day. And today, we're about to talk about China. All right, China's in the news a lot. You know, they're doing stuff. You know, being mean to America, and America's being mean to China. But we're going to talk about what made China and the United States the, kind of rivalry that we are today. All right. So in your notes previously, we've been talking about the cultural shift in the 1950s, this idea of super conservative American culture, all that kind of stuff. We're going to kind of jump around a little bit, and that's just how it is in here. So I don't want you to make a new section. I want you to talk about, or just write down, Communist China. That can be the title if you'd like. That's what we're going to talk about today. I got to take a water break. I'll give you a second to jot that down. It's refreshing. All right. So the year is about 1950. So I want you to write this guy's name down. Okay. Maybe I'll put a title down here because it's kind of hard to spell. Mao Zedong. So Mao Zedong was the communist leader of China in the 50s. Now, notice what I just said. So obviously, China in the 50s becomes communist. So a lot of the Asian countries are a lot more willing to become part of the Soviet Union than the European countries. So take a minute. Actually, you know what? You can even pause me if you want. Take a minute, and I want you to discuss briefly with the people around you for about 2 minutes. Why do you think that is? Why do you think a lot of the Asian countries were a lot more willing to become part of the Soviet Union, than Europe? Go ahead and pause me. I shall wait. All right, welcome back. So here's some thoughts that I have. For one, I want you to think that a lot of the Asian countries faced the consequences of imperialism in a different way than the Europeans did. The Europeans, the Western Europeans, countries like Spain and Germany and France and England, those countries are the countries that did the imperializing, right? So they didn't face the consequences in the same way. But then you look at countries like Vietnam or the Philippines or China, obviously, or even Korea. They face the direct consequences of imperialism, and they see the violence and the hardships that come from it. Okay, imperialism is a uniquely kind of capitalistic idea. It's this idea that it's survival of the fittest. It's like these people are not as advanced, and so you can take them over. And communism is very much the opposite. It's like everyone is equal, and the government makes everyone equal. And so that concept of a government making everybody equal and being for the workers, that is extremely appealing to a lot of Asian countries. Hope that makes sense. Actually, that might be a good thing to write down. I would say underneath Mao, you could put many Asian countries are interested in joining the Soviet Union. Obviously, that's not me saying all Asians want to be communists, but their governments, for the vast majority of them, are interested in joining the Soviets. They feel like they have more connection with communism than they do with America. Okay, so let's look specifically at China. What hardships did China face during World War II? We talked a little bit about that just recently, right? Think about the Japanese treatment of the Chinese. They experienced horrible, horrible things at the hands of people trying to take them over and imperialize them. After World War II, even though they were allies with America, they are way more drawn to the Soviet Union. And think about how close the Soviet Union is to China. It kind of makes sense that they would be natural allies. Well, the Soviet Union backs a candidate, a communist candidate for the presidency, really the chairman is what they call it, of China, and that's Mao, okay, Chairman Mao. Let me hit you with a statistic. All right, most people don't know this. Stalin killed more people than Hitler, okay? Mao kills more people than Stalin. All right, so a lot of Americans don't think of Mao as being, this really evil guy. He was. The reason why he's not remembered in the same way is because the method of killing is completely different than the Holocaust or things like that, even though it actually was a Holocaust. It's just a totally different method. So I want you to put underneath Mao, I want you to write down the Great Leap Forward. Okay? The Great Leap Forward. Here's what this was. The Great Leap Forward was an attempt for the Chinese Communist government to industrialize at a super quick rate. So think of it kind of like what the Japanese did, except the Japanese did it in the course of 70 years, 80 years. China is going to attempt to, they already had an army, and so they weren't using swords and stuff, but they're going to attempt to basically change their culture from being mostly agrarian, meaning agriculture. Most Chinese people were farmers. They're basically going to force all the farmers to become factory workers, and they call that the Great Leap Forward. Okay, so if you want to write that down underneath this, or underneath the Great Leap Forward, you can say communist. Sorry, don't write that down. Communist government's attempt to force industrialization in China. You're welcome to pause me whenever, okay, or rewind me. Communist government's attempt to force industrialization. Sorry, man. The yawns just get me, dude. All right. Hopefully this is all making sense. All right, now, you might be like, well, that doesn't sound too bad. Why would that lead to the deaths of millions of people? Well, I want you to think for a moment. If China is mostly farmers, all right, they have operated for really their entire lifetime with this idea that there's always going to be food, there's always going to be people providing the food. But if you take all those people and you force them to work factory jobs in an attempt to industrialize and make China a great industrial giant, what happens? Well, you become completely reliant on food being imported from other places. It doesn't mean there's no farmers. It just means that the people who are farmers by trade are no longer farmers. America, you might not think about this very often, but America is 100% reliant on farmers. We would collapse if there were no farmers. They're the backbone of our country. So this idea that China is going to become this great industrial power by abandoning, what really the communists say is the old way, right? It's the old way. So you're going to leave it behind. The factory is the new way. The worker. Everyone, I want you to write this down. The Great Leap Forward causes mass starvation. And it's not like Mao did this and was like, oh no, oops. No, he knew it would do this. He knew that this would cause the deaths of millions of people. All right, while you write that, I am going to pull up my notes here, and I'm going to tell you the exact statistic. All right. Ready? How many people died in the Great Leap Forward? The moderate estimate is 30 million people. Think about that. Just for reference, the amount of confirmed Jews and people that died during the Holocaust, confirmed number, is 16 million. That's pretty wild. That's double the amount, okay? So why is he not remembered? What do you think? This kind of goes into the same discussion as like, well, why isn't Japan, held accountable in the same way that Germany was for what happened in World War II? But China doesn't get nuked. So I want you to maybe think for a moment why that is. Why don't we recognize, this great atrocity? Well, in my opinion, I think the answer is pretty simple. I think the reason it's not remembered is because the method of killing. Starvation happens all over the world, okay? Someone ordering the gassing of 16 million people, we can look at that and be like, all right, he's immediately, responsible for these people's deaths. But starvation is different because it's like, well, there's a lot of factors that go into starvation, correct? But I want you to think, this is a way for him to basically because, by the way, China is still extremely populated, and they're always trying to cut down their population. This was a way to basically get what he considered the weak people out. This resulted in the deaths of 30 million people during the Great Leap Forward. Mao is a dictator, all right? Like plain and simple. He's 100% a dictator, and the United States sees China as a serious threat. Now, the dangerous thing about China today is that because China is still has communist ties, they don't have to pay their workers the same way that we do. You ever wonder why everything is made in China? It's because it's cheap to make, all right? They make it, they will sell it for a fraction of the price it would take to make it in America. So for example, right? Actually, I'll show you this watch I'm wearing. Okay, I like this watch a lot. I think it's super cool. My wife got it for me for Christmas, but I price checked this watch. It's about $70 because it is made in Arizona. So they have to pay American workers and watchmakers to make this watch. I could have gotten a watch that looked exactly the same off of Temu or Wish.com or something like that, and it would have been like $10. Okay? So if you are a businessman, which one are you going to do? Are you going to, sell the watch for cheaper, or because you don't have to pay the workers? Does that make sense? So it's like I could make all my things made in China, price them for a little bit cheaper than I normally would, and I'd still be making more than my money back. Do you think the Chinese did this on purpose? Absolutely, right? I mean, think about it. Think about how much power they have over our economy. You ever consider that? When people are like, well, why don't we just start manufacturing things here? I don't think we understand how that would affect every business on the planet. Okay, do you think they want that? Do they really want to create jobs here? No, because what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to pay those people. And right now, they don't have to pay those people in China. There are all kinds of human rights violations that go on in China, and we take advantage of it. So I want you to be thinking about that. This idea of America versus China is not just a black and white issue. It's extremely complicated. Okay. So remember, it's pretty easy to look back in history and be like, well, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. I would say Mao is 100% a bad guy. Stalin is 100% a bad guy. You can look at America and say, I will happily say, by the way, I'm American, but I mean, I can look at our faults. We were the better option, 100%. However, that does not mean that we are perfect or the good guy. Does that make sense? Good in comparison to Mao is not that high of a achievement, okay? He's a dictator that killed 30 million people. So a lot of things are good in comparison. At the time in America, right, think about this. People would look at the Soviet Union and they'd say, okay, lots of jobs, like excess of jobs. I could be treated equally. Everyone's paid the same. There's no wage gaps or anything like that, nothing. And they look at America, and Americans would say, well, why would you ever want to join the Soviets when you could join us? And you know what a lot of people who are not from Europe or places where there are white people, you know what they say? They say, why would I want to join you if you don't even let people who are not white drink from the same water fountain? And I think we can all hear that and go, yep, that is a fair point. And the U.S. government sees that, which is why when Martin Luther King Jr. comes up, there are some people in the government who want him to stop. They don't want to, listen very carefully. We're kind of getting ahead, but I want you to think about this. There is more at stake here with the civil rights movement than just, well, there's racist people. Yes, of course there are racist people, but in the eyes of D.C., Washington, it's not just, well, we don't want Martin Luther King to be saying all that because we don't like black people. It's, we don't want him to be saying that because he's making us look bad on the world stage. Think about it like that. Think about this in the context of the Cold War. And then it begins to make sense why someone like John F. Kennedy, who's probably never talked to a black person in his life, he's a rich guy from Boston, why he is now allying himself with Martin Luther King. All right, food for thought. I just want you to be connecting all these dots under the context of the Cold War. I'm going to stop there. I hope you have a blessed day. I just almost slipped off the table. That was embarrassing. Life updates shall be coming soon. I should be getting close to spring break. Maybe it is a day of spring break. If so, I hope you have a fantastic day and take care. Peace.